Cronin needs to adapt his style or face diminishing returns in on-court success and in future recruiting.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I am your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, D1 play-by-play broadcaster, coach, your host of Locked On UCLA for the last few years. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free, whether it's your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. Welcome back to all those everydayers out there. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Where we get started today, does Mick Cronin's defensive approach hinder UCLA's ability to win? Does it affect fan attendance? Does that affect all the recruiting? And we'll talk about the end UCLA Baseball's opportunity to potentially host the opening weekend of NCAA tournament play. First, let's talk about the UCLA approach. Mick Cronin's status: if you don't play great defense, if you don't deflect, if you don't hustle, if you don't learn his defensive first mindset, you will not play. And oh, by the way, if you turn over the basketball, you will see yourself on the bench immediately. And that's led to a lot of complaints from interest in just the overall gameplay, comparisons to Ben Howland. We've seen fans dip in attendance. Obviously, his career started before COVID. We've seen that translate to the lack of non-conference games at home that can really apply to it. But in certain times in recent years when the Bruins needed to get a bucket, it was, can they get the defensive stops? And maybe they'll get a bucket, right? Full defense, but not a full offense. What does that mean? Well, Mick Cronin's best teams, I was doing a little bit of the numbers over his last few seasons at UCLA. His best teams have been when they've had 130 or more forced turnovers compared to turnovers of their own. So if they're about plus 130 in the overall season total in turnover margin, that usually dictates a very good UCLA team. It really does. When Mick Cronin's teams are successful, you see that team that was really good, that won the Pac-12 regular season title, would have gone on to compete for a national championship if his team wasn't hurt 2 years ago. You had the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year. You had the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year in Dembona, who was elite defensively, athletically, in the paint. Then, with Jalen Clark, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Tiger Campbell, all those pieces together, that led UCLA to be a team that was one of the most dominant in the country and could have gone on a run, and we wouldn't even be talking about UConn. But then we saw a team that was all right a couple years ago, and you're like, okay, like they weren't as good defensively and they turned over the basketball. And then last year, a lot better this last season that just ended, a lot better defensive metrics, and still little, quiet offensively at moments, okay? You go back to his first year, UCLA struggled very early in the Mick Cronin tenure. They played well at the end prior to COVID canceling the NCAA tournament. Before that tournament cancellation, those turnover numbers between offensive numbers and what the Bruins forced on the defensive side were pretty similar. You're like, okay, you see that in the record. Well, when you actually look at the team that made it to the Final Four, they didn't have that many more steals. They didn't have a lot more turnovers forced than turnovers gained. You know what they did have? They had the best three-point shooting field goal percentage in Cronin's UCLA tenure, 37%. And I went back and I looked at the numbers of the best three-point shooting teams that year. I know it was the bubble, so maybe they shot better and there was a lot less fans. Either way, UCLA was amongst close to the top 30 in the country in three-point shooting percentage, close to 37%. The best since, 35%. And you're like, okay, is that big of a difference? It kind of is. 37% of team that's shooting well. They had the guards. They had the Jules Bernard, Dave Singleton, Johnny Juzang, who had knocked down big trays. And while they shot well, they also had that Mick Cronin trademark defense, right? They had the offensive capability to knock down threes, to go back and forth in an overtime Final Four game with the undefeated Zags at that time in the Final Four. That was a high-scoring game. While in the Elite Eight, it was like 51-49 versus Michigan. So there's different tendencies and different needs from a Mick Cronin defense. You have to force turnovers, get deflections, but also keep teams off the scoreboard and rebounding. So it is necessary for teams to play defense. You look at the statistic, heading into the NCAA tournament, UCLA is one of those, 10 or 13 qualified teams that if you look at the KenPom rating, teams that were in the top 30 offensively, top 25 defensively. I forget the exact numbers, but you have to be both good defensively and good offensively. Usually a lot more elite on the defensive side and pretty good on the offensive side. And statistically, analytically, UCLA's been kind of there at times. But when you watch it, you're like, well, UCLA hasn't done a lot, which is why the Bruins went out and got Donovan Dent. And what did his recruiting go between? You had the Kentucky style with Mark Pope, right, which is what he brought over from BYU, more of a high-flying, up-and-down offensive mindset in that SAC world of crazy basketball right now. And then you got Mick Cronin, where everybody's talking about, there's no way Dent's going to go and take a little less money to go to UCLA, play for a tough-nosed, hard-minded head coach where it's like, you got to do this, all right, pick and roll action. We're not going to throw the ball to the post consistently. We're not going to use the big men. We're going to have more of a different type of approach. We go iso ball. So I think what UCLA has to try and adapt for Mick Cronin in this next year or so is, can he be a little more relaxed, have a little more understanding, a little different offensive approach? Because the team that shot the best is the team that's gone the farthest in the NCAA tournament. His best shooting team, his best offensive weapons, obviously, finding the Johnny Juzang in the transfer portal. You had that Tiger Campbell on that team. If you mix in a couple of these transfers shooting well with these returners, you get that impact transfer like Johnny Juzang, the leader on the court like Tiger Campbell, and that's what Donovan Dent fits, all while hitting the Mick Cronin defensive mindset, that mandate to play at UCLA. This is a team that could be good. But it has hurt UCLA when Cronin refused to play Daimar as a freshman and similar things as a sophomore. But what's funny is that even though William Kyle was an elite defender at South Dakota State, it didn't earn him minutes, although he did have an in-season surgery and then had to fight his way back on the court for minutes. That didn't necessarily earn him minutes. Cronin went back and forth between what's his best defensive lineup and best offensive lineup this last season. And sometimes we were left shaking our heads. What are they doing on offense? And how is this helping them on defense? So Cronin can find a way, an offensive set that fits Dent's abilities, that fits this team that is going to be undersized against the physical front in the Big Ten, against some of these other teams across the country. Can UCLA score points? Because not every time is UCLA going to hold every team under 70 points, under 65 points. You got to go out there and be able to outscore the opposition. And when Cronin doesn't seem to want to always do something like that, or is willing to admit to that in the post-game presser, it's like, turnovers, this. All accurate stats, all accurate things. The best Cronin teams can play defense and keep you in the 50s, but the best team that went the furthest, they shot the basketball really well. And that's why the analytics favor you have to be elite defensively and really good on offense. And the eye test hasn't shown that right now for UCLA. So the pro right now for the Bruins, they've brought in the pieces that could get them there shooting the basketball. The con, do they have the defensive fronts? And does Cronin have the patience with a smaller lineup with less depth than he had in terms of playable guys these last few seasons to make it happen this year? Has that hurt attendance? Has that hurt recruiting? I think so. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. There is nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. You've been watching these games. They've been coming down to the wire. Upset Central. Huge comebacks. And when it's electric in the arena, you should head to Game Time so you can be part of it without the stress of buying those last-minute tickets. Let's think about it. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, and when demand is sky high, prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer when their last-minute deals save you up to 60%. I've used this to go see playoff games before. The biggest, the best of matchups for me, I went to Game Time. They saved me a lot of money for some of the biggest sporting events I've ever wanted to see. So the all-in pricing means there's no surprise fees at checkout, so you see exactly what you're going to pay before you click that button. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeemable code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, here we are, moving on to the second segment of Locked On UCLA. How has this affected the future, the Mick Cronin defensive approach, his defensive dogma, if you will? Has that affected attendance? Are the Bruins not exciting to watch? Well, when they're winning and they won the Pac-12 and they're more fun, okay. When they weren't as good, fans clearly didn't show. And then you had the move to the Big Ten in addition to all those mediocre non-conference opponents. You bring them together, like, okay, that's a little less fun to watch. Okay. But then when was one of the best, most exciting seasons of UCLA basketball? All right. While the football team's currently in the wave of bringing the UCLAs, we think about the other bombastic family that came through UCLA. We think about the Ball family, which only had Lonzo Ball actually playing a UCLA uniform. The Bruins went to Kentucky and won. They would score. They were up-tempo. Pauley Pavilion was rocking. They played some of the best teams in the country, even though it ended in a Sweet 16 appearance, and that was probably one of the knocks on Steve Alford. The Bruins are like, all right, defensive-minded approach with Ben Howland. Steve Alford was trying to go, led to that super fun year with the freshman phenom that was Lonzo Ball and the rest of the Bruins that year. And you saw that with attendance. You saw that with fan interest. You saw that continue with building recruits. Now, the problem was Steve Alford couldn't get past the Sweet 16. He couldn't go on a run. Even with that best team in a rematch against Kentucky, the Bruins fell short in trying to win the overall Pac-12, win in the NCAA tournament where they couldn't get past, De'Aaron Fox, where they played defense. All right. Still, Steve Alford went out and would get the best and the best of recruits. Got the Lonzo Balls, got the guy after that, he kept going and getting guys. And the beginning against Mick Cronin was he's winning with Steve Alford's guys. And now we've seen Alford go after a year of a wasted class in the class of 2023. They're almost all gone. All the impactful guys, other than Brandon Williams, are not at UCLA. We look at, what's Cronin gone after? He likes undersized big men who can grind and battle for rebounds and work their way for, rebounds and defensive intensity, despite, what do we have? We had a 7'3" unicorn in a Diamara. And the Bruins didn't utilize that to their advantage when there clearly was, at many points, an advantage for UCLA when Mara, when healthy, when fully energized, when fully conditioned on the court, the Bruins were a completely different team. When he played more than 15 to 20 minutes a game, if he was able to. Now, you look at the recruiting, we see UCLA. Okay, who are the guys that are coming to UCLA? Well, Eric Freeney, a guy that had to sit a year, is one of those guys that, I can take tough coaching from Cronin Centennial. But now in today's society, is it Cronin's approach or is it the kids that are being raised while they're developing their high school skills? Cronin has been on record multiple times criticizing the way that basketball is coached and brought up and taught in the United States, right? It's the high school system. It's the AAU. They don't know how to dribble and pass, which is all fair. But how can he also do that where we've seen a lot of other coaches in the country have more success getting semi-similar defensive metrics, but being so much more exciting to watch, so much more exciting offensively, where they can win a game. It's 196 sometimes in regulation, but they can also put the clamps down defensively and get the stops when need be. You saw later in the tournament, the bigger, the better teams, the defensive numbers showed. Houston was in the national championship game. They're right there. But it's not like Florida couldn't play defense either, and they won the championship game. They had some good players. They could hit threes and score the basketball, but it's not like they couldn't play defense. When their best player wasn't even making shots towards the end of the game in the national champ. Think about that. And UCLA was struggling to make shots against Tennessee in the second round game in the first half, early second half. And that was a team that barely got to the second weekend in Tennessee, and UCLA couldn't do anything with them with their players in foul trouble. The lack of depth, the lack of recruiting, building. Now, the one thing is, when UCLA is so tough defensively, so good on defense, they're going to be in every game, and they are tough out. Nobody wants to face the Mick Cronin style. Generally, teams play a lot better or worse against UCLA with their offensive numbers, although there have been times when the Bruins are a bit shoddy guarding the three-point line. Thus, we see Sebastian Mack gone. We see the likes of William Kyle gone. We've seen Adai Mara, where Cronin his freshman year is he has to earn time on the court. We've seen Dylan Andrews leave. You bring in Donovan Dent, who can play both ways. You bring in an athletic Booker, Steven Jamerson to fortify the size in the paint down low. Jamar Brown, who's got some solid defensive metrics, rebounding numbers, and elite shooting numbers from UMKC, with all the guys who helped revamp the culture in just a little under a season at UCLA, from a non-tournament team to a team that finished top 4 in the Big Ten. You get that and a little bit of an uptick offensively mixed with Donovan Dent. That can lead to a couple of these 2026 guys in the high school recruiting game committing to UCLA. some of these guys that have been at UCLA for a year or two, sticking around and developing, and then Cronin's style is going to work. Although it's not always the most exciting to watch, and there is a vibe around UCLA. Like, I don't know. I'm starting to see more comments on this podcast where it's like, hey, Mick Cronin's not the dude. Some of the people who are like biggest Mick Cronin supporters, I don't know how I feel about that. He likes to talk a big game defensively. But can he, it's not like a complete overhaul. Not, it's one of those you look yourself in the mirror like, did I do everything I could do to get this team to win? And he certainly does that. But does he do that in terms of, hey, can we switch things offensively? When the best shooting team he's had at UCLA got to the Final Four, it was a half-court buzzer beater away from playing in the national championship game 4 years ago. And that's the problem. That was 4 years ago. And that team has come up short ever since. Can they get the recruiting, the attendance, the interest, and the results on the court? Or is Cronin just going to get roasted for his off-court tirades in the press room about his players again and again, where his guys back him up, they play hard for him, but then there's a disconnect. And that's a problem. You have to both facilitate the relationship between the players, the PR to the fans, and make them interested while delivering the on-court results and still making sure these players get paid. It's a fascinating and tough time to be in coaching. And, more power to Cronin to be in there, but sometimes you got to be willing to adapt in certain ways. And is the defensive dogma the only way to do it? No. And hopefully Mick Cronin can find a way to get the best out of this team this year. Next, let's talk about John Savage's job this season. A year after UCLA ended the Pac-12 in as terrible a fashion as he could, the freshman class, all sophomores this year, led by Rock Jalowski, it's a team that's borderline on the edge of hosting. But will they? Let's talk about what different outlets have said about this team potentially hosting the opening round of the NCAA regionals next on Locked On UCLA. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? If you turn any TV, you can turn it into a gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. There's no console required. All you gotta do, grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into your Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. You're sitting there, you can be like, oh wait, let's go have an EA Sports College Football 25 marathon right now. Go play it, and you can stream all your favorite TV shows and movies. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, there's more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services: Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. You're like, hey, I want to cozy up, watch a movie with the honey, watch a show. Like, what do I got? I have the Fire TV Stick 4K device. That easy. All you gotta do is sign in. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV/LockedOn. Again, that's Amazon.com/FireTV/LockedOn to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Again, Amazon.com/FireTV/LockedOn. All right, here we go. Moving on into this third segment of Locked On UCLA podcast. We're talking UCLA baseball. The Bruins are down to their final couple of weekends in the regular season before the Big Ten tournament, and then they get to see what their tournament fate looks like on Memorial Day whenever they release the brackets. So here's what UCLA looks like in the Big Ten standings. They are a game ahead of Oregon, a game ahead of USC, but they're one game behind Iowa in the loss column, and Iowa has their bye this weekend. They're playing Oregon State in Des Moines, and then they'll host Oregon in Iowa City. So a non-conference weekend against a top 10 team in the Beavers, and then they host Oregon. UCLA, if they go 5-1, I'm very confident UCLA will be in first place for a Big Ten championship. Problem is, if they go 5-1, Oregon sweeps Iowa in the final game, they'll be co-regular season champs, and UCLA would actually be the 2 seed in the Big Ten. So a 6-0 finish to the end of this weekends. I think they still have one more midweek. If UCLA wins their next 2 Big Ten series against Illinois, who is 12-12 right now and lost 4 games in a row. If you play Northwestern, who sits there near the bottom of the standings, 10-14 in Big Ten play, losers of 2 in a row in the end of the season at home, you go 6-0 in those 2 weekends, which is very possible. Oregon wins one game in that series against Iowa, And then next thing you know, UCLA is a co-Big Ten champ. If Oregon wins 2 out of 3, UCLA can go 5-1, tie Iowa atop the rankings. Oregon would dip, and then you need to hope USC would lose a game, and UCLA could have a tie across the Big Ten championship. If they sweep, Oregon wins 2 out of 3 against Iowa in the regular season finale. That helps them with, oh, hey, we want to host. We got the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament. We won the Big Ten regular season, inaugural year. Look at that. The problem is I'm looking at all these various places, right? Looking at D1 baseball, they have UCLA hosting, but they're at the edge of that. They would host maybe UCLA. It would be UCLA, Irvine, Arizona State, San Diego in a regional in Los Angeles at Jackie Robinson, which is kind of funny when UCLA could be hosting a regional when they were locked out of their own field in the fall based on the battle between the government, the VA fairs, and UCLA leasing the field. And they do have to find a way for a new home potential in the future, but it is an ironic twist that after all that, they could host an NCAA regional. They went from, oh, they could host a regional and a super, to they're on the bubble of hosting a regional with Corvallis, with Oregon State, Oregon, Arizona. It's a big battle with all these West Coast regionals. They normally don't give 3 to 4 West Coast teams regionals. The difference is all these former Pac-12 teams are in 2 to 3 to different conferences, right? You have Arizona, Big 12, UCLA, Oregon, Big 10, Oregon State, who's an independent, UC Irvine, who's up there, had been pushing out of the Big West as a borderline host. You've got 4 conferences or independents represented with 5 different opportune hosts on the West side. That's going to be good for the first weekend of West Coast baseball. A lot of teams will be out West, but that doesn't mean a lot of West Coast teams are going to make it through. They'll get 1 representative to the Supers and then 1 maybe to Omaha. Still, UCLA's on the bubble there. It's the difference between hosting Irvine, hosting ASU, or going to Irvine. So D1 baseball, they have UCLA hosting. Let's go to another site, College Sports Madness. I've been following their bracketologies for a long time, very long time, and they have UCLA sitting there as a 2 seed in the Austin Regional. Take with that with a grain of salt, but their latest bracketology has UCLA not hosting, and they have Oregon State hosting. They have an Arizona hosting. They have Coastal Carolina hosting. Only 2 West Coast regionals. All right, that's the fewest I've seen. Looking at On3, you go down the On3 website, and you're like, wait a minute, is UCLA going to host? And yes, they are. They would host UCLA, Cal Poly, Sac State out of the WAC, and also Mississippi State. Winning the Big Ten would do a lot for UCLA in the regular season. Winning the Big Ten tournament with another win over Oregon to even up that head-to-head series, give them another quad 1 win with a very good RPI sitting just outside the top 10 as we speak right now, early May. That helps the Bruins case. So right now you have 2 out of 3 projections having UCLA as a host. Now, looking at Baseball America, they also had UCLA as a host as an 11 seed. So you got D1 baseball that's got the UCLA Bruins as a 15 seed. Baseball America's latest projection has the Bruins as an 11 seed. Maybe this is based on them potentially winning the Big Ten in the regular season, based on a 6-0, 7-0, 5-2 finish to end the regular season. But the Bruins still have to take care of business, and a lot of it involves them hosting Irvine, hosting Arizona State, and then some 4 seed either from the East Coast like the Ivy League or hosting the WAC champion like Sac State. All fascinating things, which still would include an Oregon regional, an Oregon State regional. The difference between UCLA and Iowa is in the last 4 in, and UCLA is in the bid for hosting. So it's not like the Bruins aren't going to make it. It's a matter of them, do they control their path to hosting? They do. If they win and get the job done, while there won't be a lot of RPI building opportunities until the end of the Big Ten tournament, you add that, you have a gaudy win-loss record, a solid RPI at the moment. As long as that doesn't oscillate a little too much and just decline at the very last moment, the Bruins have a very solid case for hosting. And I think they need it. You play home, you force these teams to come here. You don't want to go to a crazy crowd on the road in Oregon State. You don't want to go in a crazy crowd on the road at Irvine or elsewhere. You want to go to Arizona, go High Corbett? No. Get forced to an SEC or Big 12 school? That would be a bit brutal and rough for UCLA. Tough pill for them to swallow if they can't get the job done. But John Savage's team has put themselves in position, despite losing 2 out of 3 to USC, to go from borderline 2 seed to hosting, all because UC Irvine lost 2 out of 3 to UC San Diego, a team in the middle of the Big West Conference. So despite a losing weekend for UCLA, the Bruins bumped themselves up. Now, the loss to Long Beach State and the Dirtbags on a Tuesday does not help all those when it comes to RPI, a road loss. The Tuesday midweeks do have importance, but not as much as sweeping the rest of the Big Ten and having Big Ten champs next to your name in the regular season. That would do a lot for them hosting. It'd also do a lot for Iowa, who is wanting to make it into the tournament. If they get 2 wins against Oregon State, 2 wins against Oregon, they're obviously in. But they don't. They're trying to hold on to that Big Ten title for dear life, and they still might not even make it in. While UCLA is like, yeah, we just want to host. And they're holding on for dear life for that. 15 seed, 16 seed, as high as a 10. Back and forth it goes. The Bruins, if they take care of business, they will host. It's just a matter of going out and doing that in Champaign this weekend. In the meantime, wait for more Locked On UCLA episodes. We'll talk more football, basketball, baseball, softball, everything. The softball teams in the Big Ten tournament. We'll update that next episode, and we'll talk more here on the Locked On UCLA podcast. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been the Locked On UCLA podcast. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.